All right, I think we are live. Andrew, thank you again for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem at all. Like I said, it sounds like you had a pretty good weekend. Do anything fun?
Yeah, I went down to the Braves game, and on Sunday
Okay.
ended up being a doubleheader with all the rain we had.
Mm-hmm.
Got to watch history be made yesterday, the fewest hits in a doubleheader by the Braves. So
Okay.
wasn't a good outcome if you're a Braves fan.
You know, I'm trying to get into baseball. I'll admit it's not maybe my favorite sport. It's a little slow for me, but I get it. I get it. I actually went to a lot of I shouldn't say a lot. I went to a few baseball games in St. Louis. Was it St. Louis Cardinals?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun. And the tickets there are actually really cheap in St. Louis. But I had a good time. Really, I like to go for the food more than anything. That's kind of my shtick. But for sure. Are you from Atlanta or
No, I've just always, I'm from here in Greenville, and
right?
watching the Braves and just enjoyed watching baseball. Had the whole family with me, from my kids, my brother, grandparents, everybody was there. So we made a big day of it. And
Right.
enjoyed a lot of the food and the ballpark and everything else.
Well, that's certainly a lot of fun for sure. Yeah, like I said, I was just cutting grass, sitting at home watching movies. Nothing as exciting as going to the baseball game for sure. But yeah, so I wanted to bring you on today. I've seen that you are obviously a local leader here. Co-founder, if not the founder, of Proactive Response Group. Kind of wanted to dig deep into kind of your journey to Proactive, and kind of where you guys are today. But I find your journey to that, when we were on the phone just a few weeks ago, really, really interesting. You said you started at the Citadel, later came back to Greenville, and worked at the Greenville Sheriff's Department, right? And then joined their SWAT team, and where you kind of assisted in a lot of the high risk incidences, hostage situations, armed robbery, really high intense, high octane issues, which I find really, really interesting, in and I'm interested to see how you've applied that to your current business here at Proactive. And so you certainly have a ton of experience in this field, but certainly want to start with, kind of your choices of going to the Citadel, because, even I myself, that was actually one of my choices when I wanted to go to college. I was picking between like South Carolina, Wofford, and the Citadel, and I think even Furman at one point. What was kind of the jump to Citadel, and why did you kind of want to choose that?
So I realized probably about midway through my junior year in high school that I needed structure in my life. And
yes,
one of the reasons, and a buddy of mine who I had kind of grown up with going through high school, he was a year ahead of me. He went down there. So my senior year, I got to kind of listen and hear the stories from him, and it just sounded awesome. I went and made a visit and realized, hey, this is a spot for me to go, and I loved it. A lot of people have, some bad stories and different things, but
hazing going on
here. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'd go back and do it again any day. Yeah. I was telling somebody the other day, they're like, man, it had to be horrible. I was like, no, it was awesome. You woke up every morning, you got to go work out. Somebody else made you breakfast. You went to school for a few hours, and then you got to go, intramurals or sports or whatever you wanted to do for the rest of the afternoon. It was a great time.
Right.
No, there was people yelling at you every now and again. Oh, well.
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned to you a few weeks ago, I was in the ROTC, which in my college, I only did 1 year of it. I think 1 year was enough for me, but it gave me enough time to just get a little experience as to what that might be like, even in like the actual armed forces too, getting up early, getting some structure in your life, how to tie a tie, all those little things. I almost feel like it's a really important thing for a lot of people to at least try once in their life. Maybe it's just a semester in college. Maybe you do, just an ROTC program, or in high school. Maybe you go to the Citadel or something. I think it gives you just a little bit more of a respect factor for what these men and women are really going through. I don't know. I think that was my initial thing. I was like, I don't know. I was getting yelled at in ROTC, and I'm not somebody who handles conflict very well. But no, for sure. So yeah, the Citadel's a great college. I'm glad you had a great experience there. And so again, you later transitioned back to Greenville. Was that straight out of college? Why
Yeah.
back to Greenville? Why not go to Charlotte or Charleston or wherever? You just want to kind of come back home?
No, kind of my career path in college, I was a criminal justice major. So I knew that I wanted to get into law enforcement. And throughout that process of going to career fairs and meeting professors, different things, I developed a relationship with a professor there and connections here with the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. I'd never talked to him before or really even thought about working for him. And then I met the recruiter at one of the career fairs down there, talked with him. I wanted to go somewhere I was going to get some good experience. My ultimate goal was to, at that point, become a federal law enforcement officer, but you had to have some professional experience leading up to that. I wanted to get in a bigger department where there was a lot of stuff going on, where I could learn as much as possible so that I could jump to that federal law enforcement career. And so that's why I kind of picked the sheriff's office here in Greenville. Coming back home was just an added benefit for me. I did enjoy my time down there at the coast, but I kind of found that I would really rather be closer to the mountains than the coast if I have a choice in the matter.
You know, I kind of feel the same way. I love the beach. I love, you know, who doesn't really? But it's almost kind of, if you live there, the luster kind of goes away over time.
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of want to be, whenever I go to the beach, I want to feel like I'm on vacation.
Yeah.
And so certainly, you know, but the mountains are really great too. But I think that's one of the beautiful things of the Carolinas in general, whether you are in South Carolina, North Carolina, you're a couple hours away from the beach, you have the mountains, there's so much to see and there's so much to do. So I think that's absolutely great. And so you joined into the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. Did you go straight into the SWAT side of things, or
No,
how did that transition?
Yeah, you got to start out on patrol. And so I think I tried out for the SWAT team after being there for about 4 years.
Right.
And kind of, I really enjoyed patrol because it was different every night. You were never doing the same thing over and over again. And I was assigned to, if your listeners know anything about the Greenville area, I was assigned to the west side of Greenville, traditionally a little bit higher crime, a lot of work for cops to do over there. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting to know the people in the community and trying to make a difference in learning what was causing these crimes and could we get ahead of it and prevent them. So I enjoyed that. And through that, met some of the guys on the SWAT team. I said, hey, you should try out. So I started looking into it and seeing if I thought I could make it or not, and tried out. Barely made the team when I tried out, but got on there and started learning and enjoying that even more, and just kind of kept on going through that for the next about 7 or 8 years.
Okay. So pretty decent tenureship there. Now, what are generally some of the requirements to get into the SWAT side of the business? Certainly you have to be athletic. You know, what other things are they looking for?
Yeah. So the trial process, you go through some physical fitness testing, and it is nothing super strenuous, but a lot of people don't make it through there. So you go through some physical fitness testing. Once you've passed that, you have to obviously shoot pretty well. So you go through a qualifications course with your pistol. And then once you've passed that, then you have to sit down with an interview with the team members that are there. That's the most stressful part of it. You're sitting in front of the room. Basically, they call it the hot seat, and you sit in front of this room, and everybody that's currently serving on the SWAT team is sitting out there throwing questions at you. How would you handle this situation? What did you do here? Going back and looking at your personnel file. Why did you do this? You got in trouble for that, and just throwing everything at you. And you've got to be able to answer those questions. And that's definitely the toughest part of it. And the goal in that is, and the SWAT commander at the time he said it, that anybody can learn to shoot a gun. With enough time and enough practice, anybody can become proficient at shooting a gun. And so he's not worried about that. What he needs people that think on their feet, but can also shoot well.
Right. And then most certainly be able to handle the pressure, because as I mentioned, a lot of those issues you're in, hostile, high octane, your adrenaline's pumping. Can you keep cool under the pressure?
Right.
you know?
And the sheriff's office does a great job of training that into you, how to deal with that stress and to make sure you're prepared when you come into some of these calls that are very stressful and could have some bad consequences if you don't make the right decision. And so the guys that were training us at the time were great. They had some awesome experiences that kind of led them to the training model they were using at the time. And based on some of the success stories we had of calls that we responded to, I think that the track record spoke for itself. That training was valuable.
Good. Now, so 8 years into your SWAT career, what was the catalyst to jump into proactive? And if I remember correctly, it wasn't exactly proactive to begin with. I think you might have started a company before that.
So
But what
the
was,
company's been,
yeah,
the company's been the same. And basically what happened is my business partner and I, so you mentioned I was a co-founder of it. Throughout the process of being on the SWAT team, one of the things that we had to do was train other deputies how to respond to critical incidents. And so we were part of a team that created a new training model. And that started, I want to say in 2010, 2011. And we started a training model there where we were using simunitions and putting deputies in real scenarios to have them make some of those tough decisions we were having to make as a SWAT team so that they would be able to make good decisions when they're out by themselves answering a call at 2:00 in the morning. Mm-hmm. So we had been doing that training program for several years and saw great results with it. The training really applied to real life. We had a lot of success stories to prove that training model was working. And so my business partner, Chad, and I were sitting around one night and we're talking about the model's great for training deputies to respond to critical incidents and active shooter events and everything that it covered. But we're missing something here because the people that need to be trained to respond to an active shooter event are the people that are actually in the offices or the schools where they're happening. The cops are coming, EMS is coming, fire's coming, but there's going to be a lag time from the time the first 911 call goes out to the time those responders get there. And you can drastically, even as an unarmed civilian, you can drastically change the outcome if you make good choices. Mm-hmm. So we started kind of researching what was out there for civilian training, and we didn't really like the options that we saw. A lot of the options tell you to do things that create victims. They're not what we call proactive actions that lead to your survival. They're actions that are just hoping the bad guy makes certain decisions. I don't want to hope about a bad guy. I want to make decisions for myself that I know will lead to my survival. Mm. Through this research, then we created a training model for civilians that give you good options for survival and also cover something that we found was missing from these other models that are out there for training was the medical aspect of it, making sure that if you are hurt or a coworker is hurt in an active shooter event, that you know what to do to save their life. And there's a lot of things that we can do in these shootings that save lives of people. So we created better options for people. And then also the kind of the end game of if you do get hurt, you know how to survive by some very simple medical equipment.
Right. And is that more training in like CPR? If there is an active shooter, maybe you have tips on maybe where to go. Could you give some examples?
Sure. So one of the biggest things is we want to learn to recognize some early warning signs ahead of time. And so this is all part of our training that we provide now. And what we've seen as a trend is obviously these events are increasing now. In the last few weeks before us recording this podcast, there's been several violent attacks in workplaces, active shooter events across our country. So
we'll dig into that here in a second, because I'm also curious about that aspect too, as to why that might be occurring as well. But
so one of the big things that we saw and we continue to see in researching these events is that there are almost always some early warning signs that indicate somebody is having some trouble going down a pathway towards violence. And so we educate staff on how to recognize those early warning signs. Then we help companies create plans to make sure that if an employee recognizes early warning signs, that they know how to report it and they're comfortable reporting it to the right people. So then beyond that, we want to make sure you understand some good, valuable response options. Hiding under your desk is not a valuable response in an active shooter event. If there is a person running through your office, your school, your church, looking to kill people with a gun, hiding under your desk is not the option you need to choose. So we can prove valuable options that we know lead to survival in the end. And then we'll break down into what we call preventable causes of death. And that's where we go through the medical aspect of it. And it's different than CPR, different than first aid. We target the things that we know kill people in active shooter events that a civilian could have a positive effect on. Control, breathing, airway, just some simple things that we know would lead to more people surviving these attacks.
Right. And do you also go into schools, elementary schools or anything like that? Or is this more centered around a corporate facility?
No, we have clients everywhere from churches, schools, corporate facilities. As a matter of fact, in the state of South Carolina, we are certified through SLED, the state law enforcement division, to provide this training to schools, and they have to have it under state law. So we do go in and teach a lot of schools as well.
Right. And so, as you mentioned earlier, there's a higher uptick of these incidents occurring. Do you think that that's more caused by, partially, I think, and we're not going to jump right into the George Floyd thing. I don't want to really talk about that right now, but certainly, given last year, there's a lot of, and I've been saying this on a few of my other podcasts, just simple mental disarray. I think a lot of people are having some trouble either with depression or anxiety and all these other mental issues, just given the year that we've had in general last year. I think it's had some turmoil on some people's, mindsets. Do you think that's part of the cause of this uptick, or, where is this coming from?
Well, you kind of hit it right on the head. It's coming from the stress that we have in society right now, whether it's from social unrest, like you're talking about, political unrest, the response to the pandemic. And those are kind of the three big ones because they can create stress in so many areas of your life. Just think about the response to the pandemic. You may or may not have a family member who suffered from it, died from it, is hospitalized from it. So that's a lot of stress. You may have different restrictions placed on you by your employer about masks, vaccines, and all these questions. That's adding stress to our lives. So when we add stress to our lives, we tend as human beings to not deal with that stress very well. And when a confrontation happens, instead of being able to solve the problem like two professional adults, now we resort to violence much more frequently. And so we started seeing that trend back in March of last year, actually, that the stress levels were so high in the workplaces that were still open, we started seeing a lot of violence. And from a client standpoint, we receive multiple calls a week right now of potentially violent situations, whether it's a termination or some type of disciplinary issue going on with an employee, even down to simple things. Still to this day, there are people that are getting in either fist fights or arguments about wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. And it's not just that me and you disagree, we have a discussion about our points and we move on about our day. It's getting the throwing blows or waiting in the parking lot for you. So we're seeing that across the board, that these stress levels from whatever it's causing that stress is leading to more violence in the workplace.
Right. And I find that interesting that you said it began occurring of March of last year, which is arguably still early stage COVID. And so what that's telling me is it's just almost from the get-go that there was tension behind it.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating that it would occur that quickly. And so is this more happening in geographical areas too, or are you finding it almost across the board, whatever state you're looking at, that the rates are kind of the same?
So we've been digging pretty deep into that recently with a big study that we're doing for an insurance company and looking at the risk. Are you more likely to be involved in one of these attacks in your workplace in a certain geographical area? And we didn't really find any correlation to geography, but there are some correlations between the size of a employer and the size of the municipality that they're in. So larger cities had higher frequencies of active shooter events in the specific study that we were putting about 300 something incidents through.
Right. I could see that. And again, going back to what you were saying, where if there's all this stress happening and if you're in a big city, I can imagine like a place like New York or let's say LA, where there's just so many people around, that added on to with just all the other stress that's going on can, again, kind of heighten the rate of that, what might be occurring. And again, also, if you're in an employer situation, your experience working might be different if you're a team of 10 versus like a company that's got 5,000 employees.
Right, because it's really easy for that group we were just in a dental office last week training, and if something was wrong with one of their coworkers, they would know because they work together in such a close, confined area together. And so it's easy for them to know, all right, Andy's struggling with something, he needs some help. And then because they're so tight knit, they're much more likely to reach out and say, Andy, you've been stressed out this week or upset or edgy or whatever it is, let us help you. Compared to those employers that have 5,000 people and they're running 24/7, 3 shifts going, nobody knows anything that's going on there. They're just trying to get the product out the door and looking at the bottom line. And so we do see in those really large employers, there's just even more stress to it because it doesn't have that kind of like family atmosphere to it.
Right, right. And I know that my sister works for a company called Bullhorn, and they are a tech company centered out in St. Louis. And they do a great job working with their employees in terms of career planning, allowing them to wear whatever they want, have whatever kind of hairstyle they want. And they're very, I would argue, more progressive on that front of they don't really care about the presentation of the person. You can be yourself. They are very conscious about who you can talk to. They've got very good corporate governance in terms of even the lowest person on the rung can reach out to the CEO and talk to him. Do you find that those things help too, where there's just this large open communication?
Absolutely. And we like to refer to it as creating a culture of communication within your organization, regardless of whether it's big or small,
right?
Of whether you like it or not. I see you're wearing a dress shirt and a tie right now, but it's very infrequent, even as many different types of settings that we're in. We don't see men or women dressing the way that they did even 10 years ago in a professional aspect. And if you like it or not, that's just the way that the trends are going right now.
Yeah. Yes.
So we found that just creating that open culture where you can, we've got to be reasonable about it, does kind of lower that stress level where it's possible. Mm-hmm. And like you said, we got to be reasonable. We can't say that you can wear anything you want because there could be safety concerns in different environments and things like that. But having an open discussion on it and seeing, would it positively or negatively affect our overall culture, and then trying to make choices that lower the stress level and increase the, how happy people are at work every day.
Right, right. And my dad's forcing me to wear this tie, by the way. No, I sometimes actually enjoy doing this, but usually I'm kind of like you, wearing a polo or, whatever, and a little bit more relaxed, but yeah. I totally understand that. So we talk a lot about active shooter training, emergency medical training. I'm looking at your website now, emergency medical training, situational awareness. Where do you find the most demand? And so, like you said, you've seen an uptick. I think what you meant was an uptick in the active shooter department. Is that typically like just across the board where you're just seeing a lot of this?
Yeah, that's where we get most of our work. Now, we've got a lot of things outside of specific active shooters that we do just targeted at limiting workplace violence, making sure that you are mitigating any risk that you have that we know that is there. Like termination hearings and strategies and things like that. We've done a lot of work with that recently. Mm-hmm. And what happens generally is we will have, motion detector on the lights here.
I was gonna say power outage.
Now they're saving the earth by having motion detectors instead of switches in here. So if you sit still too long, your lights go out.
Hey, you know what? That I'm cool with that. I'm cool with it.
I just need to move a little bit.
Yeah.
So with what's going on in society right now, with the FedEx shooting in Indianapolis, Colorado, Atlanta, and all of these violent attacks taking places in a work type setting, our phones, our emails just go crazy after that, because so many people right now specifically were focused on mitigating the risk of COVID, and they neglected the risk that the stress that COVID response has placed on their workforce, realizing that could lead to violence. Now, I think we're seeing some of that now, that everybody's so stressed out and it's leading to people acting out violently.
And I can see that specifically with a job like FedEx or UPS or even, US Postal Service, where when everything's locked down and everybody's purchasing from Amazon and they're having everything shipped, their workload increased to, tenfold.
Right.
And I can see where, at least from the stress perspective, they're receiving that. But yeah, and I would say, what are the recommendations that you're having with these companies to lessen that?
So creating that culture of awareness, making sure that your employees understand that you care about them and you care about their well-being. So for those larger employers, that means making sure that you've got a employee assistance program in place and that the employees know how to use it. So when we go into these large organizations, we'll interview people before we start the training process and ask them a few questions. What would you do if an active shooter came in here right now and started shooting? The most common answers we get are, I would hide under my desk, or it's way too scary for me to think about, so I don't want to think about that. Neither one of those answers is very good if you want to survive an attack. Mm-hmm. We also ask them, do they know about their employer's employee assistance program? Most of them do not. And a lot of employee assistance programs will have different ways in there that you as an employee can reach out, activate the program, and then go through some counseling if you need to for finances, for relationship issues, for any number of these things that cause stress. And it doesn't cost the employee anything. Your employer's already paid for it, but very few people use it. So that's a big thing right now, is evaluating your need for an employee assistance program, and then evaluating, does the large population in your workforce, do they know how to use that and what it could cover for them? So making sure they're there. For smaller organizations, just actively as a leader, as a manager, reaching out and making sure that people's stress level is low, their mental health is okay. And if we need to get them some help, figuring out what options we have to do that. I guarantee you it'll cost a lot less in the long run to send somebody to some counseling sessions 4 or 5 times than it would if they lose it at work and act out violently.
Right. Now, for anybody who's watching this, is there any recommendations you can give them right now as to what they can do, maybe something quick? Because you mentioned, don't hide under the desk. That might not be a great solution for you. What's something that they can probably act on or take away from today? And
so what I would recommend for everybody listening is to evaluate whether you are the top tier of leadership or the very bottom. Evaluate if your company's active shooter response plan is providing valuable, effective training, or is it just checking a box? Go through there and look at it and see, does it make sense? Is it given to every employee? So that's a big thing that we see, is that companies may train 5 to 10 people, 15 people on their leadership team so that they have an emergency response team, but they've 200 people out working on the floor that don't know what to do, don't know what to look for, and don't know how to react. So we recommend training everybody there. We do it through a combination of in-person training, that's the best, but obviously that's not possible for everybody. But we've also got an online program where you can go through the same information, and that way everybody has a common response model. So you do send a percentage of your workforce through that in-person training, another percentage through the online training. And we want to make sure that it empowers people. So regardless of whether you use us or another program, I don't ever want it to create fear. If you're training people through fear, you're not going to be successful in a critical incident. We want to be empowered and leave that training knowing that if something bad does happen, that they can survive. We want it to be simple. If the process is too complex, it won't be possible for people to implement that process. And the ultimate driver has to be survivor, not anything of any other less importance. The ultimate driver of everything in your active shooter response plan has to be survival for the organization and the individuals that work with you.
Right. And I would imagine maybe even further to the point, maybe not even no hero situation. Nobody should be engaging, obviously, the active shooter to some degree, or how would you?
So we don't want there to be that hero. I'm not telling you to go seek out the shooter but we do want you to have a plan in place that if you can't get away, obviously getting away is going to give you the best chance of survival, right?
Sure.
So you won't be able to get out because, the building's set up or the bad guy's between you and your only exit. So making it hard for the bad guy to get to you after that. and then ultimately defending yourself too. And one of the downfalls that we see, this is a very common training model out there. It's called run, hide, fight. And if you have heard anything from the federal government, that's what they teach. But in that model, they tell you over and over again that only fight as a last resort. And there are white papers and studies out there that show that in critical incidents, this has caused some serious hesitation, which led to bad choices and injuries with people. I don't want you to hesitate. I want you to understand that there could be times where violence is taking place and you have no other choice but to fight. And it might be your first choice and your only action that you have. So we want to create that idea and that empowerment that even if you're unarmed, even if you're smaller than the bad guy, you don't know what you're doing, there are some very simple things that you can do that drastically increase your chance of survival.
Right. And what is usually the response time for like a SWAT team to arrive at the situation? I mean, 20, 30 minutes? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, for the SWAT team, it's going to be different depending on the area that you're in. But for the entire SWAT team to get there, 20 minutes is going to be really quick. They're probably closer to 30 minutes to an hour for most agencies or areas. But what we're looking at now with active shooter events, the law enforcement guys that are there that are patrolling, more than likely they're going to be there between that 5 and 10 minute window is what research kind of shows. Right. And the training right now says that even if they're by themselves, they're not waiting for a team of guys. They're making entry and trying to find the bad guy. But what we have to realize is when law enforcement gets there, their main goal is finding that bad guy and stopping him from hurting anybody else.
Right.
They're not stopping to help you if you got hurt. They're not giving you directions on what you should do. They're finding the bad guy and that's it. So then what we look at past that is how long does it take for the EMTs, paramedics, and firefighters to get in there and start rendering aid to those people that were hurt. And on average, you're looking for that between somewhere in 18 to 24 minutes of time. So a lot of bad things can happen to you. Then you can bleed out and die from a gunshot wound in 3 to 5 minutes. But if you know how to use a tourniquet, you can put it on in about a minute and you're safe.
Exactly. And I think that's where it really comes being really important, where if you can train at least the majority, if not everybody, like you said, on medical training, on CPR, or, on these, the best way to, approach these situations, the higher likelihood that people are going to survive if they are shot or something like that. And I think that I'd like to highlight some of these, success stories you have on your website here too, where, the training that you've provided has actually helped a ton of people. And I'd like you to talk about these a little bit.
Sure.
I think the first one we're looking at here, it says, Jeremy was on his way home from working second shift when he happened upon a severe car accident on I-85, found 13-year-old Grayson, who had been ejected from the vehicle and was bleeding severely from his shoulder. Talk a little bit about that. Jeremy, he was working second shift. Where was he working at? The training that he received, probably the medical training that you had gotten.
So he works for GE Aviation here in Greenville, and they had, just before that incident, he had gone through our training. He purchased, when he left class, we recommend having bleeding control kits in your cars. And at the end of class, he came up, he said, guys, I really want one of these kits. He bought a kit, put it in the trunk of his car. And a few weeks later, he emailed us and kind of told us that story. And he was just headed home. And basically the car was a group of teenagers that were coming home from vacation. Their family was following behind them in another car, lost control. The car flips. Jeremy goes up there, realizes that there was some severe bleeding coming from kind of high up on the shoulder of Grayson, who was 13 at the time. And he knew that from his medical training, he needed to pack that wound and stop the bleeding. And the way Jeremy described it to me was, he said there was more blood coming from it than he had ever imagined in his life. And we've confirmed through Jeremy and Grayson and the medical responders that were there that had Jeremy not known what to do and had he not stopped, that Grayson probably wouldn't have made it. So even though the employer paid for the active shooter training, it saved the life of a child one night in a car accident. So now actually Jeremy and Grayson, we got them back in touch with each other after, and now they're pretty close friends and their families are close. Jeremy hangs out with the Grayson's family on holidays and stuff. So
that's incredible, and again, more speaks to just the more need for everybody to really have this. I mean, I went through CPR training in high school, And I always kind of wondered why most people just don't know this. The more people that know it, or medical training in general, and then I'm not saying you have to be able to like, do surgery on the fly or anything like that, but just like the little stuff to be able to save somebody's life out there. And if I'm not mistaken, actually here in South Carolina, we have the, I can't remember the law. It's the
Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan law. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you're not impacted legally, I think,
Right.
from trying to save somebody's life. And I think that's an incredibly important law to have out there.
Absolutely.
You shouldn't feel like there is going to be a negative effect by trying to help somebody.
Right. And everything we teach is covered under that Good Samaritan Act in the state of South Carolina and most other states too.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're talking about, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to do these things. And they're so simple. We've never had anybody go through our class, thousands and thousands of people that we've done this training for. And we've never had anybody say, that's just too hard, I can't do it. When they leave, they say, you know what, it could be my family member that needs it. And now I know what to do. We also teach them not only how to use those kits that we recommend, but also how to improvise with other stuff you may have around in case you can't get to that kit. So we've got, and I'm glad to tell more of the stories on there if you want to hear another one that was.
Yeah, I was actually, and actually, how about you pick one? I was going to go for the Anderson School one, but I'm actually interested to hear what's kind of on your mind right now.
So Clayton, that was one I was going to tell you was Clayton, and he is a high school teacher with Anderson District 1 schools. So this is a cool story from a business standpoint for us for multiple reasons. Number one, because that school district is so awesome. Their leadership reached out to us and they said, you know what, we're tired of showing this same active shooter training video. And so what we've seen is most schools, districts in our state, they show this same video. It's a short video that shows a guy walking through a school, blasting people with a shotgun. Mm-hmm. Scares the staff members. And so we have, we know a lot of people in the school district, and we hear what's coming back from these videos is that the teachers see them, they're scared, they shut down, and they don't learn anything from the video. So what Anderson District 1 did was they said, we want something different. So we trained all of their employees through our entire program, including the medical, our active shooter response for what they should do in a school, what they should look for in their students to see if there's some early warning signs there, and then how to respond if there's an emergency. And so basically Clayton, he bought a kit from us again, took it home with him, and he was working one day in his garage, cutting a piece of wood, and the saw kicks back out and runs up his leg, cutting him severely. And so he was home alone, saw tons of blood, couldn't get up and go and like get his bleeding control kit, but his in-laws lived just down the street. So his mother-in-law was able to make it down there, grab his bleeding control kit. He put his tourniquet on, saved his own life. And you can actually hear Clayton tell that story on our Instagram page if you want to hear it from him directly.
Really?
So
I'll link to that when I clip this later, because I think that's incredible.
Yeah,
and
he's awesome, dude.
He did that himself. Now, I'm seeing a picture here, and forgive me for my ignorance here. A tourniquet is where you're really you're cutting off the blood flow. Is that right? Or
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, for extremities, it's just basically a strap, and it's called circumferential pressure, and it just squeezes the tissue and stops the blood flow to it. A lot of people assumed that based on old information that they're very dangerous and they cause amputation, but they really don't. Especially a commercial tourniquet, there's very little risk of it ever hurting, causing amputation, or even causing nerve damage. So highly recommend.
And it seems from this picture that he was able to get stitches on the leg. I mean, is he walking to this day?
Oh yeah, perfect, fully recovered, no issues. That picture was taken. I found out about the incident while Clayton was actually still in surgery. And the reason I found out is because if you buy one of those medical kits from us, we warranty it for life. So if you ever use it, we replace it for you free of charge. And so I found out about it. Somebody called me and told me that he had used it and he was in the hospital. I reached out to Clayton and it's like, man, I'll bring you a new bleeding control kit, drop it off with you at the hospital because you may need it on the way home in a car accident. You never know. And he's like, nah, I'm getting out of the hospital tomorrow. Just meet me at the house. And so it's just a couple of days after that, he was back home in that picture you're seeing online. And
that's incredible.
Kind of one big thing why that story is so powerful to us as a business and an organization is because almost every other school district in our state shows that 4.5, 6 minute video, whatever it is. If Anderson District 1 had chose to show that video that year, instead of having hands-on training, Clayton would have died.
Right.
It is an investment
100%.
to train people, but that investment paid off in saving a human life.
Well, has that brought up anything for you and your team to maybe work on that? Maybe, and I don't know if the solution is just another video, but maybe done by your team that's maybe more to the point and easier to understand. What do you think is the better solution to that? Or is it just simply bringing in a group like you to
Well,
talk
honestly,
about this?
there's no substitution for hands-on training, but making sure that whatever training that you are using is valuable, not just checking a box. And in every one of our classes, we want to make sure that we are providing valuable, effective training that actually works. Not just because you have to have active shooter training or because you know you need it. We're going to show a 5-minute video, but does it work? And everybody who's listening, I encourage you to evaluate your plan. Sit down and look at it. Put your leadership team around the table and run a tabletop exercise and decide where your shortcomings are. And if your plan, if your training's not valuable, you're just wasting your time, and you could cost yourself, your organization, tons of money. What a lot of people don't realize is, look at FedEx right now. We just got an email on Friday that because of the shutdown in Indianapolis from the shooting up there, it's affected their business across the entire country and entire world. So what we have to realize as a business, from a business standpoint, is if there's a mass casualty event at your site, it's not just shut down for a few hours while it's investigated. It's shut down for weeks, maybe even months. Some places never reopen. So the cost of being shut down is huge. So you've got to balance that cost of being shut down because you didn't do what you should have to prevent it versus the cost of the training.
Right. Right. And like you were saying, people who are at home can actually access online courses to do this.
Sure.
And are those like videos, or how's the online course look?
Yes. So just individuals, if you want to look at our online training, you can go to proactiverg.com, go to our online curriculum up there, and it's $24.99 per person. So you sign up on there with an email, just like you do on anything. You put your personal information. We'll send you an email that gives you access to the course. Ours is set up in 4 different modules. The module that talks about the pre-incident stuff that you need to be aware of, the module that talks about during the incident, a medical module, and then the aftermath. How do we survive as an individual and as an organization if we saw this? Let's just be honest. If there's a shooting in your workplace, even if you didn't see anything bad, even if you didn't hear the gunshots, it's going to be traumatic to you. Now imagine if you stepped over the body of one of your coworkers to get out and save yourself. We've got to have a plan for the aftermath as well and surviving that. So the online program kind of goes through that in 4 modules. It takes about 40 minutes to complete.
Right. I think that's great. The bleeding control kits, what exactly comes with those?
So we can kind of customize that. The big things that we have to have in all of them are going to be a tourniquet. And we recommend the CAT tourniquet from North American Rescue simply because there's a lot of tourniquets out there and they all work. But what we found through training a lot of people is that's the easiest one for the first time user to be able to put on and put on effectively. So a tourniquet, a pressure dressing, which is basically a souped up ACE bandage that can be used to create pressure on a wound, wound packing gauze, and chest seals. We want to have those items in each one of our kits. And beyond that, depending on your work or your industry, there may be other needs that you have, and we can customize those kits and add anything in there that we need.
Right. And I think for me, like what I would like to know is kind of like what's next for Proactive. So you obviously have a great business plan going on, kind of your 3 targeted areas. What are you seeing that you would like to improve on or continue to work on or move into for Proactive?
Currently, right now, the biggest area is because of all of this stress in the workplace, creating threat assessment teams within organizations and guiding those threat assessment teams to be able to decide, was that comment that the coworker made out of stress or out of anger, is that worth us doing something else with it? And what from there, what should we do? Do we need to get them counseling? Do we need to call the cops? Do we need to, figure out what's the right thing to do? And so creating those threat assessment teams and having an evaluation process for any threats of violence that come in from our workplace. As part of that, having a process in place that you follow every time for terminations. So a termination strategy. So we've kind of got the active shooter training down. The biggest thing with us is scaling it right now. And we're in the process of training more instructors that can go out and teach this in other areas. So we do have teams that we can move to different places and teach multiple classes in one day, but building those and making more. And then also creating some more active shooter videos. The one that you see on our website right now is filmed in an office setting. Now, the options that we give you, they apply no matter what environment you're in. But filming another one of those videos that is more in a manufacturing setting and kind of branching out from there. If you work in a manufacturing setting, you don't want to see a bunch of people working in an office dressed real nice responding to this. You want to see people that look like you, that work like you, responding to it so that you can apply it in your specific location.
Right. Yeah, I think everything you're doing is absolutely brilliant and also really time sensitive too,
Sure.
given our current environment right now. And so I have to, thank you for, creating this, and because I think there's just a huge need out there for most businesses, if not all. Frankly, I would say all of them, even one that's like as small as mine, where it's my father and I and our assistant, where we kind of keep it lean, but you never know what can happen. Somebody could come into
Right.
the building and
And
hold us down.
what's more likely is that you might be out with your family or friends or somewhere on the weekend and have to apply the training rather than in that setting. So we really do believe that it's an important everywhere. And if y'all are interested in hearing more about this stuff, we do have some more. We just recorded another success story last week where a lady used a tourniquet on a family member. And we have another success story that we will be recording the end of May with a large organization that used our online learning to prevent mass chaos incidents. So that stuff is coming out. And that's one thing that we're going to try and do a better job of this year and in the future, is sharing those success stories so that people understand what we're actually doing.
Right. Now, are there other companies out there that do what you do? What would you say that your team does differently from those other groups out there?
There are other companies out there that kind of do pieces of what we do, but we're aware of one right now that does everything together that we do: the pre-incident awareness, the incident, and the aftermath. And then also the tabletops and the business continuity aspect of it that we bring in there with your leadership team, and creating that plan and making sure that if an incident does happen, that you can continue operations of your business.
Right. Okay. Well, perfect. I think we're actually coming up on the hour mark here, or at least getting a little close. I always give everybody a shot to kind of talk about or, broadcast whatever's going on or anything they want to let, my viewers know about your business. So feel free to plug anything you want. Might that be the website or anything?
Yeah. So the big thing is our social media. Follow us on social media so you can see some of these success stories. We also do giveaways on our social media. So if you follow us on Instagram, Proactive Response Group on Instagram, follow us on there. You can go back through our history and see those really cool stories. And then we post a lot of things of when we see one of these events take place, what lessons did we learn? It's free information for you. It may save your life if this happens when you're at the grocery store or at work. Also, if you're interested in the online learning or in-person training, if you are involved in a professional organization, SHRM, HRCI, state-led organizations in the state of South Carolina that have continuing ed credits, we have lots of we're certified for different boards to give continuing education credits through those organizations. So the online program is 1 hour of credit, and our in-person training program is between 3.5 and 4 hours of credit, depending on which program you go with. So reach out to us if you need some continuing ed hours in your organization. We can help.
I was going to say, that's actually pretty huge, actually. I think I might throw that on there for one of the clips, because I think there's a ton of people out there who would love to, utilize that.
Sure. And even if we're not approved right now for your professional organization, we can get approved for them. We've never had one turn us down, and we've got everything that we typically need to send to them in place. So we're glad to jump on. We've got accounting and lawyer organizations that are also in that program with us.
Right. Well, perfect. Well, thank you again, Andrew, for your time in speaking about Proactive. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. To my viewers, give him, some likes, some follows. They certainly, I think would love that. And maybe you can get some free stuff in the process. Who knows? But thank you again, Andrew. I really appreciate your time. I think that's all we need from you.
Thanks for having me. And if there's anybody that does need to reach out to me, you can reach out directly on our website and it'll come to me, and I can get back with you if you are interested as an individual or organization for some training.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you.
Thanks. Y'all have a good